Wonderful. Great. So thank you. Thanks, Nitin, for being here with us today. So Nitin is the chairman at Shell companies in India. He has been part of Shell in multiple avatars in business, and not only in India, but also in the US and Singapore. And I think you bring the perspective today of not only the business, but also, having been in different geographies as well. So welcome and thank you so much for being here with us. So the way we want to structure this conversation is on three main areas. So one is getting your inputs, Nitin, on how is the business conversation really changed and what keeps boards and CEOs awake at night. So we'll spend a little bit of time there. And then we'll move quickly into what are the opportunities that you think recruitment teams can take. And after that, I'm going to come for questions. We've not got the opportunity to open up to questions yet, and I want to make sure that we have time as well and we build some of those perspectives from your side. So let's start with the first question, Nitin, on how have you seen the business conversation evolving? And if you were to say, okay, this is really what keeps boards awake at night, how will you define that in today's context?
No, thank you, and good morning, everybody, and thank you, Esther, for inviting me here. It's a lovely conference, and I've certainly been learning a lot as I've been going along. I think from my perspective, there are three areas I would sort of focus on very much, and what I hear more often than not in most boardrooms and most of my engagements with the heads of most companies. One is just about the society's role and society's license to operate in terms of how do they start to view corporates. That has dramatically changed. Let us be sort of clear now that whether we start to talk about plastics, or we talk about air, or we talk about water, or we start to talk about climate change or energy transition, the expectation from society and all of our stakeholders, from customers, consumers, from everybody out there, has dramatically shifted in the last decade and a half. And that is changing the way that we need to be conducting ourselves and the way that we need to be doing business, which is also creating another form or another skill sets that we are still continuing to look for in our businesses. The second thing is, how do we start to act with a sense of purpose? Because people are starting to ask of companies, what do you stand for at the end of the day? Are you just simply a profit-making engine, or do you have a larger role to play in the society itself, which links to the first point? So what is your purpose in life? And this is a question that's coming down to each and every single one of us. So I'm fairly confident I know what my purpose is and my company's purpose is. But how is that purpose understood by everybody else who's out there, whether it's talent, future talent, our own employees, or even for that matter, our customers and consumers and everybody else? Because people are making choices today based on what they interpret a company stands for. And this is changing revenues in today's world. The last piece, which was also covered last time, is digitalization. But I'm not going to focus on digitalization as a skill or an efficiency, which is where most people take it. I think digitalization is radically changing consumer preferences. And probably that's actually a wrong phrase. It's not changing consumer preferences. We have, for the last couple of decades, we use stereotypes and rules like 80-20 to try and aggregate viewpoints and create ways of approaching our business models to go out to customers and consumers. But the reality is digital is the ultimate expression of individuality. It allows for a person to be whoever they want to be in any way, shape, or form. I mean, we've talked about long-tail concepts where music, as a case in point, there's 350,000 downloads, independent music downloads in iTunes on a daily basis. Whereas we could only keep 10,000, 15,000 titles ever available in a music store in the past.
Yeah.
So there is still 10 people who are downloading the 349th, 999th music song and enjoying it. What an expression of individuality. So I think these three things are definitely keeping all boardrooms awake.
Wonderful. So, and I'm already kind of connecting somewhere on what does that mean to us as a recruitment community, because I think as you mentioned the first point about being responsible in front of society. So that society are not only our customers and investors, but also potential candidates or employees. I think every one of us is either a candidate or not candidate, an employee or not employee, and an alumni or not alumni. So how are we interacting with that society will have an impact on our recruitment acquisition. And I'd love to hear how purpose and digitization is also changing the way that we look at recruitment. So what would be, you think, the impact of those business challenges on what do you think we should be our focus area from recruitment perspective?
Yes, I think you nailed it, right? I mean, I think, in the room you have a whole bunch of people who are ultimately, for a large base of people, our first line of interaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the end of the day, as we go out and we engage in universities or even for experienced hires, it's entirely possible that they have not engaged with the company before. They may have read some news reports, they may have seen it on the websites, they've done research on LinkedIn, but every single person who goes out to recruit is the first person that they will meet and the first person they will interact with. So let's talk about brand ambassadorship, right? And can you represent the company and what it stands for and where it's going? I mean, it's a tremendous burden to have, but that's exactly what a potential employee is looking at you. And reality is that they may not be a potential employee, and that's okay. But even if they're not a potential employee, they are going to go out there and tweet about it, or go and tell another 50 people, or 100 people, or 1,000 people. And so you have the opportunity to go and replicate and share what your company stands for across hundreds of thousands and millions of people through a ripple effect.
Yeah.
So that brand ambassadorship is absolutely number one as that comes out.
Yeah.
Two, I think, is about insightfulness. We talk about business partnering, and it's really easy to say. We've been talking about business partnering for a very long time, and it always sort of gets translated into, you tell me what you want, and I have a process, and then I will interpret it, and then we will do it in this particular way. But that's not business partnering. I mean, business partnering is a dialogue. It's a conversation. It is about bringing insights back to us to tell us what is it that the market really wants. What is it how do we read our potential customers and consumers and employees and have the chance to change ourselves, the way we communicate, the way we organize ourselves, the way we even market ourselves, to understand what is actually wanted by the marketplace. Because ultimately you are an expression of the marketplace. The need to see yourselves as marketeers and salespeople, is incredibly important. So I think this distinct functional lines that we've created are all blurring in terms of roles as individuals. You need to be a marketeer one moment, a sales guy the next moment, a recruiter the third moment, and maybe you'll come up with another 6 things to come back and do. But I think that's incredibly important. And the third point I'll make is really interesting. I'll tell you 2 stories. Recently, a family member of mine, went out to hire in what is an incredibly reputable company. I won't name them, and I won't name the family members. This is probably very unfair. But it was supposed to be an interview scheduled for 11 o'clock. Nobody called him till like 3 o'clock, and then then he chased the recruiter. The recruiter said, I don't know what's going on. Let me go chase. And by 5 o'clock, the person got back. This is a company that is an amazing brand. It's one of the leading top 10 brands in the marketplace. And I can tell you that family member walked away with, I don't want to work with these people. If this is how they treat me before I've even walked in through the door, right, then why would I ever want to work with them? I'm not that desperate. People are not desperate for jobs anymore, and this is a very big change. And the reality is he's told me, and I'm telling you, so there's already a ripple effect. I'm not sharing the name again, yeah? But there's already a ripple effect. Right? Impressions are being made. So the customer experience is incredibly important. When I joined Shell, I had no desire to come and work for an oil and gas company. I did not wake up, I was on campus recruitment, I did not wake up and say, I'm going to go join a big oil and gas company. I was lucky that I'd even shown up for the recruitment day because I had no intention, absolutely no intention. And the reality was that I was also incredibly lucky that there was a very, very good seasoned recruiter who happened to be there. I had a wonderful half-an-hour conversation. And the conversation was not about, this is what Shell will do for you, for all potential candidates. It wasn't a process conversation. It wasn't a, here's my storybook about, what, Shell can do. It was a half-an-hour conversation on what Shell will do for me. Now, that's a very different conversation. I am not a generic person joining this company. I am an individual. I want to hear about what the organization is going to do for me. Now, that's an incredibly different conversation than, here's where all graduates are going to go. Here's where all people from your skill sets are going to go. That's a pool. Nobody wants to be, thrown into a pool these days, is the third thing. And it's, again, that expression of individuality.
Yeah. Wonderful. So I'm quickly going to ask you a question about, from business perspective, when you look at executing the strategy that has been framed. And you've very beautifully give us a deep dive on what you expect from recruitment or what recruitment could do. I want your inputs before I open it to questions and reflections. How has the mix changed? Because recruitment has traditionally been focusing only on talent acquisition, which is hiring, and we saw in the previous presentation about the importance of talent mobility and building talent, and I think the emergence of I would say, gig economy, to say that maybe we don't have to hire somebody, maybe we can hire those skills for particular projects. And then the fourth, which is about automating, maybe we don't need to hire anybody for that role, maybe we can actually automate it. So how is the mix of looking at strategy execution changing?
Yeah, I think this is an incredibly good question. And by the way, a friend of mine is CEO of Upwork, so I'm very, very plugged into an emerging concept of how to actually partner and work with individuals who are in this freelancing sort of community also. And I think the reality is that we are all going out there and trying to understand what are these new emergent models and how do we actually put them in play. But a lot of this is, of course, is a little bit purposeful selection. I mean, we are particularly distinctly clear about where it is that we need to, come in and build our own talent. So we have an incredibly large graduate recruitment program that we go out there and we go to all of our campuses and we engage with them. We do buy talent. It does happen. So for example, we have about 9,500 people, and recently we've doubled our workforce in the last 2 years. In India, and we're constantly increasing. So we're hiring about 1,000, 1,500 people now. There will be people in the room who will be doing much more than that, but for us it's a big number. And what was really important was that we were hiring incredibly specific skill sets. For example, tax. We were shifting jobs of doing tax and fiduciary reporting from 100 different countries into India. Now that is an incredibly specific skill set and a very specific need. So yes, we had to buy that particular talent that's there. But of course, going back to the other approach is saying, for us, we don't hire for the next 3-4 years, and maybe that's a mistake for our side. We try and hire for decades, which means that you can never sort of come in with a buy-only strategy. There's no sort of thing that you just buy and then exit. Right? You can't be mercenary. There's a buy and then you still have to build them, right? Of course, then, the other sort of things that's there about looking at other models. So we have 9,000 employees. We have 3,500 contractors in India. And look, worldwide, we're only 85,000 employees, but we do a business that generates $350 billion. So we have hundreds of thousands of contract workers. So this has been a conversation for us for a very large period of time. And recently, we had a very good discussion about outsourcing versus insourcing. So we shifted a tremendous amount of work that was previously outsourced in our IT functions, and we brought it back inside. And it was a very conscious decision in terms of, where is it that we want to have, where do we see the value in terms of what is being generated from the employee base, and where do we want to retain the value? So where things are commoditized, we're happy to outsource, but where we expect there's value creation, we want to hold on to it. So that was a decision that was there. And bots is an interesting conversation because there's always this fear with bots, that sort of comes in and it's going to be a job attrition problem. My challenge with this one is a little bit more about how do I actually make bots ubiquitous in terms of how do I more train and upskill the base that I have to be able to automate and be able to do their own design programming.
Yep.
I started working in Silicon Valley, and I was in a publicly listed company. We were a small and growing side company. We were all engineers, and we walked in. And the reality was, I'm an electrical engineer, but every single one of us was expected to be able to code, right? And the reality was that every single one of us wrote our own scripts and our own automation procedures. This is in the late 90s, by the way, so I'm not going to totally date myself, but it was a while ago, right? In the Valley. So, and that was where the Valley functioned,
Yeah.
right? That every single person was expected to be able to automate their own job. Right? And we build platforms, we build capability around that. Now, I think it's fascinating for me that 2 decades later, sitting in a different company in a different part of the world, that we're having a conversation about whether we should offer that to all employees or not. I mean, I don't think that's even a question anymore in terms of that setting. But I'm going to take one more minute, because I think this 4 Bs of yours is interesting. But I think the reality is you can't have a conversation about 4 Bs without talking about maybe a B and another C. So I'll also add a little bit there.
Go ahead.
What's the outcome? And that is balance. Now, you can define balance based as diversity, and that can be gender. It can also be LGBT. It can also be differently abled. It can also be youth. It can also, by the way, in our particular context in India, be a whole different mix from different states and different subcultures. And the end outcome must be balance. Because if we are going to live in a world where we are purpose-led, where we are, where there's an expectation from society, where we are focused on individuality, without balance, we cannot succeed in that world. Any company cannot succeed in that world. So that's the outcome, and that's the other B I would focus in on. What's the C? Is collaboration. This concept of war for talent just needs to finish. I don't understand why we continue talking about why we have to fight for talent, right? I think there is a tremendous conversation where we need to have, how about we collaborate to build broad capacity and capability across an entire base. And we do a lot of things in terms of Shell Eco Marathon and Ideas 360, which is an entrepreneurial program in universities, and E4, which is how we support startups. And we are absolutely happy to go out there and partner with anybody to build mass capacity in a society, recognizing that in a lot of cases, that talent will not come to Shell for their own reasons or for our reasons, whatever it is. But that is the way that we should function. So that's my C also.
Wonderful. So 1 more B and 1 more C added. So I'm going to go straight to all of you for dilemmas, questions, perspectives that you would like Nitin to comment on. Can I see how many hands we have up? So we have around 10 minutes. So 1, 2, 3. Backbenchers questions, anybody? Only the front benchers, huh? Any questions at the back? Really? Okay. Are you there? Or you're a mirage? Okay, it's short last chance of questions at the back, because I want to take all the questions in one go. All right, okay. So can we have the mics here? With your permission, I will take all the questions. Yes, so name, organization, and your question, please.
Hi, I'm Prasad.
Yes, Prasad.
I'm from Conduent Business Services. So my question to Nitin is in lines with the last statement which he made, something on collaboration as a society, as an industry. So as a recruiting society, a lot of us have a lot of last-minute heartburns, wherein we do extend an offer, wait for a candidate then comes up, hey, you know what, I got a better deal, I'm going to another organization, right? So my question here is, talking about collaboration, why don't we, as a group, come to a thinking wherein let's not go to somebody who's already got an offer, right? Let me move on to another candidate. We knowingly are, setting this culture and a practice as a talent acquisition group that, with an intent that, hey, for me, it's like a Swiggy delivery, right? Faster for me, quicker joining. So I think we are breeding, which is something which is not right, and we're not giving an opportunity to everyone. And still we fret about the fact that, hey, you know what, I'm not able to fulfill a lot of my positions because I'm only focused on people with shorter notice.
Wonderful.
So what are your thoughts there?
Sure. Thank you, Prasad. Okay, can we pass the mic at the back? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Nitin Sonwalkar. I'm from Sopra Steria.
Yes, Nitin.
And I'm one of the happy and loyal customers of Shell. I really admire your company. Okay, my question is, Shell is into oil and gas. At the same time, you're doing a lot in terms of environmental sustainability. So do you think we as recruiters, we need to leverage these aspects, whether it is community initiatives or environmental initiatives to attract talent? Is it working, and what is your experience, particularly when you go to campus?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, go ahead.
My name is Akhil Shani. I'm the managing director of the Shani Group of Institutions. We're supplying a lot of millennium talent to companies like yourself. Now, on one side, you talk about companies trying to come up with a warm and fuzzy image and have that personal human contact and so on and so forth. And on the other hand, companies like yourselves, maybe not you guys specifically, but companies like yourselves are moving towards automation, chatbots, and doing stepping away from the human contact with entry-level recruits. Now, my question to you is that if you graduate from college yourself and a chatbot had interviewed you, would you have joined Shell?
Okay. All right, last question I'll take.
So,
oh, yeah, okay, two more, last two. Yes. Go
hi,
ahead.
I'm Rakhi. I represent Zorian Solutions.
Yes, Rakhi.
So my question for you, Nitin, would be you made a very valid point about buy and build talent, right? And I think we are in this continuous paradox, continuous dilemma. Do we just buy the talent we need right away? Or do we really invest in building when we know that the talent might just not be with us after we've put in all the investment time and effort in that? Where do we buy? Where do we build? I think, have you figured out the solution and answer to that?
That requires almost like a full day residential program. So let me see what we can do. Last question. Yes, please.
Right. Hi, Nitin. Thanks for that. That was very insightful.
Yeah. What's your name?
I just want to focus on...
Sorry, can we have your name?
My name is Sundaram.
Sundaram.
I'm from
Yes, go
Yes
ahead.
Bank. Right, so I wanted to talk about balance, and in balance, you spoke mostly from the diversity perspective. So what happens is sometimes when organizations chase balance, they get into a very formulaic mode because that is a very good way of projecting themselves. It becomes a promotion tool. But how do we achieve this balance? And for me, the way I view it is when we get more inclusive, we are actually allowing people to grow out of their identities, which would be a better way of approaching it. But it still sounds a little idealistic. Maybe you can throw some light.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sundaram. And I'm going to start actually with this question. Because I think when you mention about diversity, in our mind is all about numbers, but is it really about inclusion? And how do we make that happen, if I understood your question right? Because in many cases, I think the talent acquisition role seems to kind of be done. Like I've already got the diverse candidates, and then whether that translates into business impact or not, that's the question.
Yeah, it's so let me try and answer that. So one, is the role done? I don't think the role is done, and frankly, it doesn't take much for me to take a look at the statistics, right? And I'm not taking a look at the statistics as to how many people are hired of let's take gender as a case in point into the company. I take a look at the statistics of, do we even have, what's our candidate pool list? Right? And what's the balance in the candidate pool list? Do we even have a 50-50 in the people that we take a look at? And the answer, of course, is consistently no. Because we will use excuses like, there's only 25% of women working in this particular job, in this particular function. So therefore, we can only have a 25% in the pool. And then, yes, and then we'll come up with another range of excuses. So it doesn't work for me. I don't think that, and this is maybe a criticism of all of us, we have done enough to encourage, because, okay, so let me do, in society, we are 50-50. So let's just start in society, we are 50-50, right? By the time you get to schools, you're largely, in universities, you're largely 50-50. Yeah, maybe we've lost a little bit. So where does it happen that from that point onwards to getting into corporations, that even getting into the pools, we're not 50-50? And I suspect that we have just not done enough work to help try and solve some of the bigger structural, cultural perception issues that are there. So tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 towns, we know movement of any individual, and particularly maybe single girls, is going to be a challenging discussion. Have we solved that problem, right? Have we made it easy to have that conversation? Right? I don't think we've actually really gone and made that extra effort to solve that particular issue. So I don't think diversity is particularly solving. Inclusion is a whole different topic. I didn't cover it because I was talking to talent acquisition, but it is by far the bigger challenge that we actually have. Because once you get in, it's a tremendous amount of how you create the right experience and how do you actually gain the potential from what the diversity that you particularly created, and it requires a lot of work, and it requires a lot of time needs to be spent to create that environment. So I'm going to just give a short answer, but there's a lot more. That was another whole day conversation, right?
So let me prioritize. We probably have time for one or two more questions. So I'm going to take your question about would you have joined Shell if that 30-minute conversation would have been done on a chat bot?
The answer is of course no. I wouldn't have done it. So I don't think you should ever. I don't think you should. You're human resources. Can we not forget that you're human, right? You have a clear role to play. That doesn't mean the chatbots don't have a role to play, right? So you're also, unfortunately, sometimes human resources become the police resources, right? I mean, or the compliance resources, the audit resources. But there maybe chatbots do have a role to play.
Yeah, correct.
Right? So, but yeah, I mean, if you go down to having a great conversation, right, with a particular individual, to really convince them to come in, that is a person-to-person conversation. I'm sorry, you cannot automate that. It's just not going to happen. I will also make one last comment that I sometimes feel like recruiters have become like robots. Right? Here is the party line. Here's what I can say. It's like there's a sheet in front of you. This is what I'm allowed to come back and say. Right? And more often than not, you're not even meeting the person's eyes. You're not looking at the person. You're not looking at, you're not engaging with the person. Right? So let us remind ourselves that that is one of the biggest roles that you have, is a human-to-human people discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So last question, I'm taking Raki's. You want to applause then? Go ahead. Half. Wonderful. So last question I'm taking is Raki's on how do you break down this dilemma of build versus buy? What is your advice? And of course, that will be very relevant contextually for different businesses and different sizes and maturity of the business. But what will be your insight about what are the kind of questions we need to ask ourselves, or what is the kind of framework to think about solving that problem of build versus buy?
Yeah, I thought we tend to get into those kind of conversations typically, of course, up front in the planning of a change, right? So if you're doing something particularly new and different, then we have that kind of conversation. I thought actually the second part of your question was a lot more interesting, which suggested that we may train somebody and we may lose them.
Okay.
Right? Now, whose insecurity is that? Is that the employee's insecurity or your own insecurity? Right? I don't mean you, sorry, I don't mean to sort of point it to you, but because you're almost saying, I don't believe that I have a wonderful employee value proposition. And therefore I need to be insecure about whether I'm going to make that choice with bringing somebody in, right? I mean, so that's probably a pretty good feedback to give to your leaders and to your organization that you don't have a very strong employee value proposition, right? And that's something that can be worked on. I'm happy to sit back here and be relaxed about the fact that there will be attrition. Of course there will be attrition. There will be 8, 10, 15%. And by the way, attrition is good. Let's not be scared of attrition. If attrition is beyond average, and we of course track whether we're losing our talent or not, or we're losing people we're happy to lose, to be honest, or people who are better off somewhere else.
Yeah.
And the reality is of course that if you are losing too many talent, then it's a pretty good discussion to have. Is what do I need to do better as an organization to change and be more attractive to hold on to those people? And then that some sort of unravels it. So I guess my answer to your question is you're probably focusing on the wrong thing.
Okay, last closing, because we need to wrap up our panel today. So what would be your advice, and very quickly, one thing that we should stop doing as recruitment leaders and one thing we should start doing? Just 2 points. One thing to stop, one thing to start.
Yeah, I think you probably heard it in my sort of discussion, right? I mean, I think definitely start is engage with the people and the person sitting across them, understand them as an individual, really, really share and have a great discussion and dialogue. Talk to them like you would love to be talked to as a potential talent, as an employee. You know, let's try to treat them as humans, right? I mean, who have their own issues and concerns and emotions. And so I would really start to encourage that. I know some of you do it. I'm here in Shell because somebody did it.
Yeah.
So obviously it is possible. But I would really encourage that to start to happen. I think the stop is back to some of the things we talked about, right? I mean, it is, we need to recognize that change is coming. Society is changing. Digitalization is here. It is a fact. Individuality is here. It's a fact. Purpose is here. It's a fact, right? And we have a huge challenge in front of us as organizations. Our whole basic nature of organizations is changing. The organization's ability to survive is in question. By the way, this is not a comment on Shell's ability to survive. We're going through our own sort of journeys as to how we can do that. But every organization is going through that journey. Because it is not okay for us to go through 2 degrees C global warming. It's not okay for us to worry about waste that's piling up in the streets. It's not okay for plastics to be in oceans. You can talk about any industry, and there is change coming. And that means that we need to really start focusing on that. So stop focusing on the minutiae and the details and the processes and start focusing on that we have to start to change who we are. And this is all going to be people and talent led. So you have an incredible role to play and an incredible opportunity ahead of you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. A big round of applause to Nitin. Thank you so much.